The metaphor of painting made me think of a painting that's only partially finished, and how we have to imagine the rest of it. That was the case with this story, wasn't it? Part of it was real, but the rest of it you had to bring to the screen yourself.
It was about piecing together the history that we had, and that meant a lot of digging. And a lot of research, a heck of a lot of research. But we also involved descendants of Lord Mansfield. Every generation, they designate one member of the family to be the custodian of the family history. And this generation, it's a young man called William Stormont, who is the future Lord Mansfield. And so he came on board also as our consultant, so that we were able to see the real portraits of what these characters in the movie look like, the uniform that Captain Sir John Lindsay wore, real sort of pamphlets. We recreate the pamphlets and the kind of news stories of the day, but actually looking at real pamphlets of the time. And it was, absolutely, it was about creating the fictional elements that would support the history rather than making any kind of mockery of it or kind of undermining the history.
Did the family police you?
Not really.
No, they were fine. They were just thrilled that we could, make this film and focus on this extraordinary family member of theirs, and back in the day, also showing a light on what Lord Mansfield himself did. So they've been fully supportive, and are taking advantage of the fact that English Heritage, where they're a family home in Scone, Perth, and also Kenwood House, are able to sort of, we're going to have our junkets there, and hopefully the interest in the portrait will mean many visitors will come. I think it's just also fair to say what Amma did so brilliantly was find the story, because the painting, obviously the portrait, is the two sisters. So, and then once upon a time there were various versions of this of drafts and of our film where it was, which story we took, was it going to be a love story, was it going to be Dido's story, was it going to be the two sisters,
or even a thriller, a legal thriller?
Well,
yeah,
exactly.
This had
drama.
sort of Ye Honourable John Grisham written all over it.
Or all of the above, kind of. It was. I mean, I think the other thing about the Mansfield family is that they are rightfully very proud of this history. They're really very proud of taking care of the painting. The real painting is luminous and beautiful and incredible, but they're very proud of this history. And so I think they were glad. And I think they knew right from the get-go this was going to be a positive story. I wanted to tell a positive story about, because whilst this is obviously a sweeping love story, it's the romantic love story between John and Dido, it's also a paternal love story between father and daughter. And I think that they knew all along that we wanted to do something very, positive. This is a good part of our history. So they were fine.
Who had the epiphany? How many people walk by this painting and say, how very interesting, and nothing happens? Something happened to make this film.
Well, I'm sticking to the story that it was Damian's wife.
Tell us, Damian.
My introduction to it was indeed from my better half. I was also alerted to it by the actress Naomi Harris and indeed the writer Julian Fellows. And while I was looking for a writer for it, came across Miss Anne Sagai, who had also come across the painting, had been doing a project on Lord Mansfield himself. So we teamed up, and then that's how the genesis of it all. And in fact, originally we couldn't, slightly ironically, given the subject matter, we couldn't find a home for it in the UK. Originally it was HBO who developed it with us, and then I brought it back to the UK. With times are changing, people had were interested, and then Amma and I, with the BFI, over time managed to take it to a place where, hopefully everyone can see the power of that portrait.
Well, I felt a great deal of responsibility, but responsibility can also hamper creativity. And so, but what it did do, rather than the family policing me, it policed me so that, again, as I say, any fictional elements that were created in order to support the history. And so, as an example, I'll give you an example of that. John is not a lawyer. Was not a lawyer in real life. He was a valet in the Mansfield household. So he did work in the Mansfield household, but he wasn't a lawyer. Two things. I needed him to be a lawyer so that I could explore the legal question when it came to the Zong. I could explore both sides of that legal question. But also, John's story is actually Lord Mansfield's story as a young man. So Lord Mansfield, born in Scotland to a wonderful family, at some point a political opposition comes into power and heavily fines the family. The family becomes property rich but cash poor. So at 14 years old, he's sent over from Scotland to England to make his fortune from nothing. He has name but nothing else. He is taken under the wing of a couple of lawyers who find him to be a great orator and educate him in the law. He's passionate. He's his moral gauge is kind of, where it should be. But he doesn't have the money to educate himself. And so I wanted John to reflect who Lord Mansfield was as a young man, and also to tell Lord Mansfield's story without necessarily having to see Lord Mansfield as a young man. So it was about taking those elements of history and then kind of imprinting them in a way, or projecting them in a way that, again, would into fiction in a way that would support the history. So that's the kind of thing that I tried to do.
The portrait itself, whose title is Belle and Bet, 100 years later, was actually just called Bet, as in Elizabeth, the white girl. And the family over time had sort of, for a few decades, rubbed her out of the family history. And she was only sort of, if I may sort of say, reinstated as, with the correct title of the portrait, I think in the 1950s. So it's more complex.
The parallel of this is in the United States, the one-drop rule, which governed who you are, versus the blue blood rule, the color of the blood there seemed to trump the racial aspects, which is a very unusual cultural insight.
Well, yeah, but then I think that was the choice that the man made, not the choice that society would have made. Because I think that, by Lord Mansfield choosing to define Dido's value via her father's race as opposed to via her mother's race, I think that was a very personal choice. I'm not 100% certain that would have been the sort of, that would have been society's choice necessarily. And that is why in formal situations she couldn't join the family, because there was a sense of, well, we can break the rules as much as we like, but we cannot break them on behalf of other people. We can't expect to put other people to break the rules if they don't want to.
But then when Bet confronts her, and they're both so angry, the word that comes out of Bet's mouth, I was expecting Negro, and she said illegitimate.
And I wanted to take you there, because for me, what this was about, I wanted this movie to be about the female bond, sisterhood. And so what I wanted to do was put as much pressure on the relationship as possible so that you could see how tight the bond is. And I wanted you to love both the girls. However, if I had taken Elizabeth there with that line, you never would have come back from that. She would have been lost to us. You never would have liked that girl from that moment. What she did was she took the easier road. Dido is not allowed to be at the table for both reasons, because she's illegitimate and black. And
one spoken and one unspoken.
Yes, and therefore that is the word that was going to come out of her mouth. But she at the last moment she can't go there. She's never done it before. As a child, she makes the choice to love Dido. There have been various versions of this story, and certainly before I came on board. And Damian's version that he talks about that was at HBO that didn't work out. But even prior to Damian trying to tell this story, there are short films, there have been plays on in the UK, and they tend to portray the relationship between Elizabeth and Dido as one of conflict, one where the two girls don't like each other. When I looked at the painting, that's not what I saw. I saw love between the two girls, and so I wanted to, whilst giving you drama, express that love.